Welcome to Endurance Capital. If our first episode was about suffering well through the middle, today is about adapting when the middle makes no sense at all. Plans blow up, packs surge, markets flip, but the winners don't freeze or fight reality. They think clearly under pressure and make the next best move. To unpack this topic in more detail, I have recently sat down with Mario Mola, three-time WTCS world champion, a surgeon of pack racing and mental clarity. Together with us was Ian O'Brien, ex-head coach of USA Triathlon Elite Team, and Roberto Iannone, co-founder of Sound Dream, a startup building the first neonatal AI, a breakthrough to interpret baby cries and diagnose children's pathologies with AI. But before we get started, a quick thanks to our sponsor Stride Health. More on them later. Today, we are building an adaptive decision system you can actually use. How to stay calm under pressure, read the field in real time, adjust when the plan breaks, and still finish strong. I'm Ignacio Garcia, global early stage investor and triathlete, and this is Endurance Capital. Let's get on to it. So welcome back everybody to Endurance Capital. Today we will be talking about something that doesn't always get the spotlight, but quietly decides almost everything when the pressure is on. That's fluid intelligence, or the ability to read, adapt, and decide clearly when everything is moving. In triathlon, it's the athlete who can sit in the chaos of the pack, feel what's happening, and make the right call at the right moment. Not just once, but across the whole season. In startups, it's a little bit different. It's the founder who can navigate shifting markets, uncertain technology, and human complexity without freezing, overreacting, or burning out. My first guest today is Mario Mola, three-time World Triathlon Series champion and Olympic triathlete, known for his consistency, his tactical clarity, and the ability to run from behind without losing his head. Welcome, Mario.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Ignacio.
And with him is Ian O'Brien, a high-performance triathlon coach and head of the Ian O'Brien Coaching Group, someone who actually spends his life building athletes' minds and systems to handle high stress, high-speed decision-making. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks, Ignacio. Thank you so much.
And bringing the founder perspective is with us Roberto Iannone, the co-founder and CEO of a startup, sounddream.com, that is using AI to interpret baby cries and early audio signals, operating in a space where the signal is noisy, the path is uncertain, and the stakes are real. Welcome to the podcast, Roberto.
Hi, Ignacio. Well, nice to be here.
So today, Mario will share how he built his race brain. Ian will show us how you can train this kind of intelligence. And Roberto will translate the lessons into the world of deep tech startups. So let's get into it, guys. The first one is for you, Mario. You've spent years racing at the highest level. Tight packs, high speed, Olympic pressure. And you have the reputation, if I'm not mistaken, for being calm, being composed, and very clean in your decisions, even when the race gets messy. Where does that come from, Mario?
Well, good question. At the same time, it's difficult to find just one answer, but I guess most of it comes, as many other things, from just the experience and exposing yourself to situations that bring you to the limit. At the end, I think there's also it's very important, to be as much prepared as you can, even though there's always room for uncertainty in races. But I guess, there's the biggest, I think, clue or solution would be, make sure that you prepare, and then you have experience through it, and you gain experience through those occasions where you have to face difficulties or uncertainty. Looking back in my career, I've been in races where I had a flat tire, and in many situations that would be end of the race, but I obtained my first WTS medal in Auckland in 2013 in a race where I had a flat tire during the race, and I just had to, stay calm, focused, and remind myself that the race didn't finish until we crossed the finish line. So I think being there in the past, because I had flats in the past where I didn't win the race, but I didn't lose hope, I think helped me to then obtain the prize at the end.
So for our audience, actually, this is the first lesson. If you guys have a flat tire, stay calm, stay composed, and just continue. And you may even win the race like Mario did. So were you always like this, Mario? Do you remember in your childhood, maybe your parents can talk to you about this? Were you always composed and calm, or this is something you developed as your career developed?
I tried to always, stay with both feet on the ground and, stay calm and, try to, sometimes don't give too much importance to things that were happening, because I think that was the key to stay in the situation no matter what was happening. And I think that's something that I developed. I'm sure I wasn't born with that. I got nervous. I raced as a junior, as a youth, but I had to handle the situation, crashes, flat tires, things that we couldn't control. And at the end, I learned that if I got nervous after those situations, I was not getting anything good. But if there was something that I could take, it was just stay calm. The race continued and don't overthink too much.
Ian, let's see how you see things from your side as a coach. When you look at someone like Mario, what do you see that is different in how he handles pressure and information compared to other athletes that have similar kind of talent?
Absolutely. So I've come across all sorts of athletes over the year with huge amounts of talent. They've not always executed a race or an event to their full capability. Mario is one of those guys, and I've worked alongside Mario for a few years, watched him in many races and seen him perform under his coaching team. And there's many common factors. He said it himself, he's cool, calm, collective, and he has the ability to react to a situation. So what he doesn't do is overthink it and then become emotional because something hasn't gone his way. You can tell that he's just thinking and solving the problem, working the problem throughout. And then, that could be just staying calm, or it could be just reacting and becoming aggressive within the race to put himself in the best position that he possibly can, no matter what that situation is. And, talent, the contrast with athletes who are physically gifted compared to those who can't mentally process what's going on in the moment is the difference between winning and not winning. Now, those athletes will probably still do well because of talent, or will they actually get to that point and to be as successful and repetitive as what Mario's been over the years and how he's learned? A lot of things that are easy to see within certain people are their ability to kind of move with purpose. Like everything they do has got a reason. It's not just they're going with the flow. Those people who are an activist within the process are those people who actually yield the best results. They're the ones who are constantly solving problems and moving through as quickly as possible. Staying in control means controlling your body. So mind over matter. Breathing is nice and smooth. They're making decisions at the right level and making sure they process the information effectively and then moving. Keeping their emotions calm, especially whilst under pressure. Staying in the moment is huge. When something happens in a race and you have to kind of backpedal a little bit, what you want to do is stay in the moment and be the best version of you, because you can't change what's happened in the past. The future is going to be set. Those conditions for success are going to be set by what you're doing right now. So having that ability to do that is hugely important. And this is trainable. You can do this. This isn't magic. This just takes practice and repetition, and you can get to that level. What I do is the process I use, I have kind of like a belief process, and it's all to do with being bold. So when these types of things happen, rather than going within yourself and not acting with purpose, is be bold. Repeat being bold. That repetition creates belief. Belief creates confidence. Confidence enables control. And once you're in control, you can then develop a level of capability. And so when things don't go right, especially in some of these high intense environments, you want to get in control as quickly as possible.
But staying composed, Ian, let me see if I understood this. Also, there is also a factor of showing your competitor that you are composed, because you hear a lot of athletes taking advantage when somebody is showing a bad posture, slower cadence, breathing, whatever signals you can pick up from your competitor to just push forward at that time. Is that something you train your athletes to reflect on? Stay composed when the worst comes in the race.
Absolutely. And then just going back to what you said there, that you're putting strategy in it. So you're getting a level of control by looking at how people are also reacting to what's happening in the race. So if you can see what's going on and you can read that, that gives you feedback from how you're going to make your next decision.
And Mario, did you watch your competitors? Is that a moment to push?
Yes, I agree with what Ian just said, and I guess part of it comes as well from you being as much trained and prepared for it. It's the more trained and the fitter you are, of course, easier it is to make decisions under pressure, because obviously others would be also suffering. Everyone, it's just very, very close to that red line. So if you could be just underneath instead of over it, it makes a big difference on how do you react to those situations, either being calm or being aggressive. As I said, sometimes, when we exited the water, we had 30-40 seconds. I was 30-40 seconds behind the group. I had to quickly see who was near me or myself and decide whether I was going 100% or it was better to wait a little bit and regroup. Those things, you had to make a decision very quickly. You knew the guys in front were 100%, working since second one on the bike, while for us in the mix, it was very important. For example, who did we have around us and who could really help and push forward, and those things you had to just quickly decide at the moment, and that decision, even though that would happen 20 minutes into a 2 hours race, would make a huge impact in the result of that competition.
Well, that's a tough decision to make, to have fluid intelligence. This is the topic of this episode. When your heartbeat is running at 200 beats per minute or 190. So, that it's very easy to say, probably very difficult to execute with a clear mind. But I understand what you're saying, Mario. Let's move to Roberto. What's the founder version of calm when chaos hits? For you, it's a little bit different, Roberto. It's shifting tech on certain customer behaviors, investors causing problems, regulation, you name it. So when you listen to Mario and Ian, describe this calm decision-making. What's your version of that at SoundDream, Roberto?
Yeah, of course, in my job, the physical aspect doesn't really apply, let's say, but you have a similar level, I think, of pressure or let's say, on a similar dimension from a mindset point of view, a mental point of view. Like you're always working, always receiving inputs. You are always, let's say, whatever direction you're going at some point, you always need to change something. And there is always something that is not exactly going the way that you were planning for. And then you need to readjust. So maybe the same level of, let's say, physical pressure that Mario, I assume I never did anything like what you did, Mario, clearly, but probably similar to what you have on your body, on your mindset. We as founder, we have it on our mindset. And let's say we need to keep the focus. We need to stay calm in the middle of a storm of everything actually not going to the plans very often, right? Because that's the definition of a startup. And at some point, you still need to remember exactly where you want to get and what is important, what is not important. And every challenge actually needs to be something that, maybe quoting Ian here, needs to make you bold, let's say, If this was easy, this was already done. So that's maybe the starting mindset of every founder. If what we are trying to do was easy, it was already done, or maybe it was a crappy idea, to be honest. So if that is difficult, well, that's probably why nobody has done it before. So okay, good. You have to go through it. You have to go beyond the challenges. You have not to be pulled down by the different challenges, by the very annoying emails that you receive at 3 a.m. in the morning and then you cannot sleep, or maybe even worse, you receive at 8 p.m. in the evening and then you cannot get to sleep for the entire night. So that's something that you have to train and be able to find your own space, to at some point still survive and deliver every single day, not only for you, but for the company and for the rest of your team, right? We don't have maybe other people or competitors, let's say, or let's say other players looking at you while you run, but you have your team. And you need to bring confidence, even maybe while in your mind you're totally confused and very worried about everything that is going on. But at some point in front of your team, you need to bring confidence. So there is that component maybe, which is maybe parallel to what Mario was describing.
Yeah, and then this is the point that also Ian was making. Stay composed, and in your case, in the case of a founder who is leading a company towards big growth, you stay composed in order not to contaminate the team. You've got to find a balance, I guess, between communicating what the real situation is, but staying composed in a positive and constructive way, right, Roberto?
Yeah, at some point, your first role as CEO of the company is actually the leader of the group, right? So at some point, yes, you do 3,000 different things, but maybe the very first role that you have, even before investors, even before the market, even before the customer, etc., is to make sure that everybody in the team delivers. And at some point, if that's your role, then basically, again, be composed in a scenario where every single day there is something that is not exactly going as it should. It's basically your first mission, right? And then you need to be available in front of the team where everybody's panicking or going around running. Oh, we don't know where to go. Okay, guys. Okay, that's normal, so let's forget about this. Let's focus on what is most important right now. So that's part of your role. But again, sometimes it's also pretending, because you are playing that role, but inside you're also suffering a lot from that, right? And that's a little bit the difficult part of your role. And then you also have a family which you have to take care of, etc. So there is, because your life is not only work. So at some point you have to take care of that as well, and to be composed maybe also when you're, in my case, dealing with your daughters, and they come back to school and you need also to be available for them. So there is also that component there.
Makes sense. Thank you for that, Roberto. Let's move on to another block to talk about adaptation in real time, right? So fluid intelligence is not just about staying calm. It's adapting intelligently while we're moving, while we're pushing forward towards the race line. So in the world, Mario, in the world of WTS, World Triathlon Series, you weren't always first out of the water.
No, hardly ever. You never.
Yeah, not often. But you became famous for how you moved through the race. And, I remember watching those races, and they are very clear in my mind, especially on the run, right? And how consistent you were across the whole season in that particular strength. Can you walk us through how you read a race in real time?
I guess before a race, of course, you have the physical preparation. That's obviously the most important one. That you train and you've prepared as hard as you could for the race. But then there's the mental part. Is how do you approach that race and how do you prepare yourself, for that challenge? In triathlon, especially short course distance racing, it is very complicated to know and to plan something that's actually going to happen, because there are so many factors going on, especially in my case that I was by far not the best swimmer, so I was normally mid-pack, but that often could mean I was like 15 or 20 seconds from the front, or sometimes it was 40 or 45 seconds. So preparing for that level of uncertainty was definitely the biggest challenge. In my case, I would always prepare for the worst scenario, which meant, okay, I'm in a second or third pack, 45, 50, 1 minute out of the water, and that means there's no time to think. Just push from minute 1, 100%, no thinking twice, not looking around, because once you are that far from the front, you cannot think twice. But then there were other situations where I was, mid-pack, 25, 30 seconds, which was a distance that was manageable. And then it's how I mentioned earlier, it was important to see who was around and how the work tactics were gonna happen, because I was not gonna make a difference on my own. The biking sector in short distance, it is about a lot about how do you work in a group, and there is something that people that have no experience watching those races they see a group of 5 in front, 5 working, and then you see a bunch of 40 guys in following or trying to chase, and you think, okay, the 40 should beat the 5. But in triathlon, often that didn't happen, because the courses sometimes were not very friendly for work tactics, but many times it was because in the back there were only 2 or 3 people actually working because they believed they could win the race, while the rest, they thought they had lost the race, or they just waited to see what was happening, So you had to be prepared to adapt to those situations where you didn't know what was going to happen, who was going to work, who was going to actually contribute, and where you were going to be halfway to the bike, because I knew that if I was capable to put myself in contention at the end of the bike, which meant either in the front or with not such a big gap, I could fight for the podium. Otherwise, I just had to fight for the best result of the day, which could be an 8th, a 10th, as it was in the Olympics. But I tried never give up, at least.
But I guess, with that ability to run at, say, 21, 22, 23 kilometers an hour, right? You probably knew from the moment you stepped out of the water that it was doable, right? So it's not how much is it the training, the loads you put to try to convince yourself that you can actually run faster than anybody else?
Well, for us, obviously, it was how much energy we were burning through the swim and the bike, because we could, if we had a race that we were all running like 5 or 10 kilometers from stands, like nothing, like no swim or bike, it would be very different. So then you had to have that in consideration, that the more worked and the more prepared you were and fit, the more likely you were to start the run with fresher legs. So that was the first thing. But then I had to believe. Sometimes, I was in Montreal 2018 or 17, I remember Christian Blumenfeld was in the breakaway. There was another Norwegian athlete in front, so they were working together very well. They had like over 1:30 or 2 minutes gap, and I didn't think I could make it. But I started aggressive the run. I knew how important it was to bridge that gap as quickly as possible, to play that mental game, like if I was starting, at a pace, at an even pace, and the difference was getting smaller, like slowly, I would probably not get there. But as soon as I could, make a bite of 30 seconds in one lap, then mentally I knew, I would get stronger, and the ones in front would start doubting. And I think doubting, it's the worst thing you could do in a race, no matter in which situation you are. As soon as you get doubts in the other's mind, you've made a big step forward to get the result.
I can see, after retiring a few years into your retirement from WTS, I can see that, I can feel that passion still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
really
they were great days. Yeah, for sure.
Ian, let's talk about training adaptable minds. From a coaching perspective, how do you help these world champions, or these potential world champions, develop this ability to read and respond, not just execute a pre-written plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's not something everybody's born with, so it's most definitely a trainable thing that everybody can do. Like, you've just got to capitalize on it. And actually, it's lifelong. It's life low-hanging fruit as in business and in sport. So if you do that, you can actually capitalize on these things. And I'll go over them now. So the more you put in, the more you're obviously going to get out. So especially in the preparation phase before going into an event, like actually practicing those areas. And more importantly, developing athletes to be their own leaders. Like you want people who work with you and work for you to be able to go off by themselves and be absolutely autonomous, but be guided by you. There's obviously constraints and principles and everything else. But my job as a coach is to develop an athlete so they don't need me. That's literally my job. My job is to give them all of the skills, both physical and their mental preparation, so that they can actually go in, do the job, and not need me. Because I'm not going to be there like I am in a training session saying what they should and shouldn't do and what decisions they should make. So it's my job to develop decision makers. So, I'm trying to train adaptable minds. So flexibility is hugely important because all sorts of things happen and you've got to train people to be able to adapt to that, whether that's different types of training workouts, pace changes, like changing instructions halfway through a set or something different, adding training simulations. So I'll try and replicate the conditions that we have in racing in training as much as possible, and the visualization that comes with it. Now, obviously, we may not use the same intensity, the same duration, we'll break it down, but then I'll start adding strategy to that, start bringing other people in. So, for example, with draft legal, which is what Mario is a master at, we would use radios quite effectively, like pro cycling teams do. And I would sit there and have different people on different channels and have people work against each other and react and control the whole scenario. So the athlete in the moment, normally a lot of people will train, they will go and do the workout their coach has set them at different intervals and recoveries and all that kind of good stuff. We're doing that, but we're then adding strategy. So I'm throwing problems in. The athlete's job is to solve them. I have to teach them to do that. But what ends up happening then is you go into the race and then you're actually prepared subconsciously without realizing it. It becomes proprioception. And pretty much this is where the low-hanging fruit comes in, is if you put that kind of detail into everything you do and the repetition that you create to get to that level of confidence and capability, like you are like going to be a cut above everybody else. Like it's I wouldn't say it's easy, but it absolutely is something that happens. Another example is, and it's something not a lot of people do, is for this sport, reaction to surges. So on the run. So that happens a ton in races, but people don't really train for it. And this is the thing, you've got to be specific to train for the demands of competition. So what I mean by that is, rather than just doing a track workout, setting paces and all that kind of good stuff, which is perfect, it works, is actually every now and again is just throw a workout in there where you're going to do a reaction to a surge. And the way I would do that is I'll choose a specific run circuit and have an athlete run with me. I'll have my computer with paces so I can actually look at what we're doing and what pace we're hitting. And I will add the surges and it's their job to react to it, which is not normal. Because then you're having to react to something. So when it happens in a race, when you're reacting to somebody else's effort level and their intensity, you're a split second behind. Your cortisone level will shoot up, and that will be them in control of the race. And again, we're moving away from that belief process if we allow that to happen, because we want to be in control. Because when we're in control, we affect everybody else. So that's another example. And I think what's also important is having feedback. So once you've, let's say, for example, you've gone through a race and the race has ended and all these things have happened, is actually reflecting and looking at what has happened, what has gone well and what needs to be worked on. And also look at what happened in the leading all the way up until the race, like things that you did well, things that you didn't do well. My job as a coach and as a leader is to facilitate that level of thought so that the athlete takes it on board and it becomes theirs. Again, they're the leaders. They're the people. I'm facilitating their success and providing them the conditions, the environment, everything I can, so that they can battle in the races and be effective as much as possible. For my job is pretty, it's not stoic, but it's pretty stoic. If they do really, really well, so for example, if they win a race and it's a breakthrough, like at the end of the race, I'm not high-fiving and going crazy. Like, I'm there, well done, awesome, next time we'll do better, and I'll move away. And if they don't do well and things don't go the way they want, I do exactly the same, but slightly different. I'll be like, okay, let's figure this out. We'll review this, but we've got to do better. Move away. So ultimately, I'm stable. I'm the one person in their life that doesn't move. Like, I'm not up and down. They can be up and down, although it's my job to help regulate that. And but ultimately, I'm staying in one place. So ultimately, what I'm trying to do is develop self-leadership for them to stay in the moment. And it's a core element of high performance coaching. Is it's got to be put into training. You've got to put yourself into challenging positions. You've got to kind of do the research. If you look at any organization, whether it's business, in the military, or in sport, you're looking for little areas where you can gain an advantage, where you can actually outfox the competition or grow, depending on what your aim is. And so that's what I'm trying to do as a coach, is develop athletes that can actually perform and execute in that manner on their own, autonomously, but I'm always there in the back.
Is there a part of helping the athlete visualize potential scenarios? And you often do that with meditation. You're doing it in practice. You're putting them, you're challenging them during the training. But is that something that you work on? Trying to help them visualize potential different scenarios in a race?
Absolutely. And I think another thing is visualizing success. It's not just about scenarios. So we'll definitely put that in there. For long course athletes, it's actually a different thing, because for short course, which is short, explosive, you've got to think quick. Mario is like a guy who's been hugely successful and that had the ability to do it. And yet there's other people in long course, Ironman, etc., T100, who you have to stay in the moment for a longer period of time. So I think you can train it, and there is a lot of components to it. But honestly, I think it's one of those things that just takes practice and execution. So, and I'm a big believer in exploration versus execution. So going into these moments and into these races, trying to figure it out, and then using that to kind of build on your level of experience, rather than focusing exactly on a plan and being rigid, having the flexibility to move around it.
Thanks for that, Ian. Roberto, let's talk a little bit about reading the market and the data. For you, the race is the market, right? It's your space. Interpreting baby cries, collecting data, your customers, and the technology that you are building. How do you read the situation at Soundream? From trying to find an analogy to what Ian mentioned.
Yeah, I think in our case, and in a startup in general, I think there are many things that are similar to what Mario and Ian were describing. So in general, we start from an environment where we're doing something new, totally different in the way that it is done, or in a totally new product. Like in our case, for example, we are doing something that was never done before. So that meant that practically everything from the business model, the pricing, whether people will like it or not, how to use it. And to be honest, actually, the first years, we didn't even know whether this was possible or not. So we invested a couple of years of our life following something that it was never really done before, and nobody really knew whether it was possible or not. So that meant, that's probably also Bible of most startups in a similar setting. You have to do experiments. You have to, learn from trying things, and try to learn from any failure, actually, because they are not really failure, they are learnings, and iterate. So as Ian was saying, yeah, you can go there with a super detailed plan, but probably, you spend maybe 6 months developing the plan, and 2 days after you start, you already realize that actually, okay, probably we have to delete this and restart from scratch. So that's the daily life in a startup. So practically, in our case, we try to test things as quickly as possible, try to get response from the market, from the user. We try things, it doesn't work. Okay, good. Okay, what did we learn? What do we know now that we didn't know before? What can we exclude now? So what is the hypothesis that actually now we validated, or actually, okay, now we have to test different hypotheses because this one clearly is not correct. That's basically 95% of the life of a startup at early stage, but actually even later on. So that's totally normal for us. It's fun. It's a lot of but you probably need to like it as well, right? Because if you like everything planned and things going as per plan, etc., then you should totally not start a startup. That would not be for you.
Well, that's the topic of the next block for the discussion. When the plan breaks. This is a quick reminder that you are listening to Endurance Capital with me, Ignacio Garcia. We will be right back after a short word from the partners who helped make this series possible. One thing I've learned from athletes, coaches, founders, and everyone is that understanding your own biology is the real unlock. And that is exactly what Stride helps you do. It doesn't matter if you're a world-class athlete or someone just curious about how your body adapts when you train with intention. Stride brings you sessions, your data, and your goals into one place. So you actually see what's working and what isn't. If you're listening Endurance Capital today, you're already interested in doing things differently. So take a look at getstride.com and bring more clarity to how you train and how you operate day to day. Use coupon code Trampoline and we'll give you £100 off Stride 1 and 30% off any other individual Stride test or supplements. We all love plans, but right until the moment when reality disagrees and the plan breaks, right? So, Mario, for you, every athlete, I would say, has a day that the plan doesn't last more than 5 minutes, right? Can you share a race where your strategy fell apart early and you had to improvise to, get to the front?
Yeah, that's true. There's many more situations than where this happens than where things go to plan. One of the last big events that I competed in, which was Tokyo Olympics. That was a race where I thought my swimming level had been pushed forward, and I was expecting a gap as it was in the last cycle, which was, as I said, maybe around 20-30 seconds, which was something that I could manage on the bike and be in a second group. But I had what I thought it was a decent swim, but I came up much farther than that. It was funny in a way that both the three Spanish athletes, we were very close together, and more so, Fernando Alarza and myself were often close to each other, but Javier Gomez Noya, who was also there, he was not one of the of the ones who usually exited the water in those in that last third of the race or quarter of the race. So we had to we quickly jumped on the bike. We saw each other. We knew, again, no time to think, no time to plan. I think we all worked very well. We ended up, making it to the front. So at least we put ourselves in contention. At the end of the day, of course, we spent so much energy. We didn't have the legs to, none of us, to compete for the win. But I'm proud. We managed a situation where we could, have sent the race away or thought, okay, that's not our day, and it was a big stage. It was the Olympics, and we still put some hope in people, people that were cheering and supporting us, that we could still be competitive that day.
Ian, from the sidelines or from the coach's chair, how do you guide an athlete who is in one of those broken plan moments? And let's just step back for a moment. We're not talking about a winner. We are talking about a champion. And for me, the difference between a winner and a champion is, a champion only goes for number one. So you're really training those guys to reach number one. So how do you coach them in those collapse moments?
Yeah, there's several phrases you might use, tools, mental anchors, etc., to make them or help them make a good decision. But like we talked about before, most of this is done in the preparation leading up to it. But most definitely, we coaches will try and put ourselves on the course in a place where we can actually communicate with the athlete in some way, which will be away from crowds and everything else, and potentially on a hill, because that's when they're going to be at the slowest, etc. But some of the things we're going to do is we really want them to get back to control. And I don't give feedback as, like, well done, you're looking good, or any of that kind of good stuff. Like, it's very positive, but it's not going to help the situation in the moment. The biggest thing for me is for that athlete to be in control, and that's the only thing I'll say. I'm like, stay in control. That is it, nothing else. Apart from what's happening, situational awareness information that's happening and going on in the race. So they can't see what's going on in other areas. My job is to track the whole big picture of what's going on in the race, and they'll see some of it, because especially on multi-laps, they can see what's going on and if they're gaining people on 180 turns, etc. But my job is to provide information so they can make the decision. Again, it's going back to that autonomy as an athlete. My job is to empower them to and have the tools to do so. So that goes back to that belief process I talked about earlier. So are you in control? Are you doing everything you can do right now to set the conditions for your success, no matter what that might be, whether that's staying calm, whether that's building gradually to the next person and pulling people to you? Is this a nutrition problem? Are we getting things on board? Is it a heat dissipation issue? Are we overheating? Are we going too hard? Did we go too hard? Did we react to the race in the long course race rather than sticking to the plan? All these kinds of things. So the aim really is to control the controllables. You can't control anything else. So be the best version of you. As we talked about earlier, it's kind of the same thing. You can't change what's happened earlier on in the race. You can only change and set the conditions for your success by staying in the moment. So, and, trying to, while that's going on, trying to separate how you feel to what you see is something I use when I coach most days. If I ask an athlete how they feel, like, how do you feel? How are you feeling? They'll give me a completely different answer if I say, what are you thinking? Because what you're thinking is strategy. What you're thinking is like realism, what's going on around you. It's logical. It's things you can change. How you're feeling is an emotional response to your environment, which you may not always be able to control. So the difference between somebody who is, and I've coached people who've been phenomenal, but they've never really got to that really top level, that multiple world champion performance. And then I've had coach people who've actually done that, broke Ironman records, like repeated world champion performances, like come out of nowhere, done really bold things. And those are the people who can stay in control in that moment. So it's all about staying in the moment, being the best version of yourself. But the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is not to execute a plan that's perfect, because no plan survives contact with the enemy. It will change. The competition will do something different. You have to adapt to it. So the goal is not perfection. The goal is having and developing the ability to adapt to the situation and potentially look at all future situations that might arise.
You build your deck, you build your roadmap and your strategy, and then the market tells you something completely different. Let's try to be a little bit specific to make any associations with what Ian is saying. No, what's your version of a broken plan at Sound Dream, and how did you recognize it? How do you make decisions?
Yeah, many different examples here, but one, for example, that comes to my mind, and maybe relates back to what we were saying before, was at some point we spent, honestly, years developing a certain technology. We were working through that, and at some point we were about to be ready to launch it on the market. And we had done our own tests and stuff, so it's not like we went completely blank. But then at the moment we were about, to sign some big contracts with some big players, etc., we felt and we realized actually that there was something blocking it, right? So maybe the pricing was wrong, maybe the model was wrong, etc., but we couldn't quite let's say, get to that next level as we were planning for, and as it was basically what we assumed would have happened at that point. So then it was a little bit difficult because practically, okay, either we took some assumptions wrong about our technology, our business model, about our customers, about their willingness to pay. It's always unclear, right? And it, of course, they don't really openly tell you. So then basically what led us to do was an exploration work when practically we thought we were about to launch on the market, but to understand what instead was the assumption that we were taking that was wrong. So in our case, for example, it was a combination of different things. It was a combination of pricing, it was a combination of business model, it was a combination of basically the way that we thought our target customers were willing to sign an agreement with us. But we also got very positive surprises of things that we thought we were not able to get, but instead they were willing to, right? So let's say at some point you can plan, but at some point when actually you are there and you're about to sign the contract, then suddenly everything comes up and you have to adapt according to that. And in our case, that was like 3 or 4 years ago when we were about to go to the market, and then took us a little bit longer than what we had planned, but finally we made it. But yes, let's say our timeline was impacted by that.
Right. Let's move on to another block of discussion. Adaptation isn't just tactical. I think it's also emotional. You can do everything right and still not get the result. That's true in both sport and startups and in life. Mario, over your career, you had seasons where you were time after time on the podium, and others that actually felt heavier and a little bit more complicated. I'm sure you remember some. How did you handle those periods when results were not what you wanted to be? And what stopped you from losing your identity, your strength, or giving up on yourself?
Well, many things, of course, go through your mind, when things don't go as planned, which again, I think personally, I was lucky, for example, with injuries. I got to say, I didn't have major injuries in my career, which made much smoother, that journey. But of course, I had moments where, I thought maybe I wasn't built for this sport. For example, at the very beginning, I was junior world champion in 2009, and the year after I was quickly pushed into elite level in order to make it to the Olympics, and I count my races, many more were on the on disappointing side than in the successful side. And if you go back to my stats in those 2010 2011 years, that was prior to the London Olympics that I finally made, but just because of the last period, I was just not in contention. I was not prepared, and it was quite tough to go through that. And then you obviously start having those doubts that we mentioned earlier, and I guess then you have to go back to why was I doing that, and at the end of the day, no one pushed me to do that. It was my decision. I loved what I was doing, and I believed that I was built and made for that, and that was just a barrier to jump and to get stronger from it. And I remember in my junior days doing testing in the pool to see whether I could make it to the elite team, and based on my times I couldn't make it, and even people told me, you should focus on running because you're not gonna make it to world level in triathlon. And a bit of ego, I guess, a bit of self-belief and trust in myself, it was what at the end put me in contention for that. So again, it's just going to the basics and going back to why we are there and why we are doing that. And remember, it's going to be tough times, of course. That was an example, but it has been more through my career where, personal challenges, like accidents, that have made the journey tough in some moments, but the those moments just make you stronger. Something that it's told often, but again, 100% true.
Yeah, I guess we have another very interesting lesson here, Mario. You probably noticed listening to your own words, is that I guess a lot of the time you fail, but your constant belief in yourself and in your ambition will make you be a champion, right? And that's something that works for every part of life, whether it's in sports or building a startup. You'll get a lot of no's on the way. Craig Alexander, Croy, was actually telling me the same thing, when he was not accepted or supported in his own country. He had a belief. He pursued his own career, and there you go, where he reached quite a good number of world championships. So yeah, so that's belief. And Roberto, in deep tech, the world doesn't always go the way you are doing, the way you're building, and there can be long stretches of time of quietness where the market actually doesn't see what you are building. So how do you manage those periods when you're going through, let's say, clinical trials or tests with hospitals, whatever you are doing to test your technology, working extremely hard, but the outside world actually doesn't see the results? What keeps you with that vision and that intention? Let's be a little bit emotional here, Roberto, because you are the lead of the company.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, of course, and they happen very often. In particular, again, in deep tech, very often you're trying to do things in a totally different way compared to what everybody else tried before, and that's not because it didn't happen, it's because nobody believed in that anymore, right? So basically you're trying to do things that most people would believe it's crazy, stupid, or impossible. So that's your starting point. That's your first step into your company. All right, we are doing something that nobody believes can be done, or it's stupid, it's never going to work. Good. So that's the starting point. And then you have all people around you, including advisors, investors sometimes, that basically give you advice going exactly the opposite of what you believe. And, sometimes it's very experienced people who invested in many companies before, who advised many companies before, and still, you need to get back to you listen to everyone, but then, no, I don't believe, actually, I still believe in my own idea, regardless of what everybody else is telling you. And then you need to find your own conviction and space, right? So what drives you there? I cannot answer for every entrepreneur. I can answer for myself. For me, it's probably a combination of the more people tell me it's impossible, the more that attracts me like a magnet, so that's the starting point. There is probably, to be honest, there is probably an element of arrogance for sure, if you believe that you are more correct than pretty much everybody around you, you are somewhat arrogant, I guess. So there is that is component. But then you also need to be totally convinced about the way that you do, right? Yeah, you listen to everybody, you think about it, but yeah, you go ahead your own way. You explain, maybe if it is your investor, why you're doing that thing in that particular way. You don't really follow their advice, so to say. You paid attention to, but you go ahead your own way. And yeah, and hopefully you're right and everybody else is wrong. but yes, it's not easy, right? Because then in the evenings when you cannot sleep, you ask yourself, oh, what if they are right? What if I'm totally wrong and actually the rest of the world is right? And very often as an entrepreneur, basically, you are risking not only your work, you're risking the company, you're risking the job of the people that you hired, their family, your family, the money of the investor. So it's not easy, right? You have a lot on your shoulders on these bets that you take against everybody else's opinion.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is that the job of a champion or a CEO of a company or a startup founder is quite a lonely job at the end of the day. Yeah, you can have a nutritionist, a coach, physiotherapist, a strategist, whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to make your own judgments, make your own decisions, whether it's in training and whether it's on the race within seconds. Yeah, so it isn't lonely, but I think that's what differentiates a winner from a champion. A champion is always aiming and making decisions. The more decisions you make, the more failures you have, the more chances to win. So yeah, thank you, Roberto. I appreciate that. Ian, you don't just manage performance. You were talking about it before. You manage emotions. Athletes break down. They need support. How do you help these world champions handle doubt, injury, or quiet years without breaking mentally? What tools or conversations have you found most useful? Let's give the audience a little bit of practical tools.
Right, going back to actually Roberto when he was talking about arrogance there, my job is not to develop arrogance as such. I think the word we'd use is that level of self-confidence, because that it doesn't fully bulletproof you from, doubt or injury or those long periods without breaking mentally. Absolutely doesn't. But having that ability to know that what you're capable of and your self-belief will drive you forward. So it's a huge, that's a great point made by Roberto. Process, like this comes out a lot, like trust the process, but you need to know what the process is. And the process really, in all honesty, is doing the basics well. I talked earlier about adding lots of information and putting people in different scenarios to test them and develop their ability to make good decisions in the moment. But doing the basics well will yield you the best results, even at a high level of performance. So, and that process includes managing how you feel. It's not just about what you're thinking, it's about how you feel. And you've got to kind of normalize the work that you're doing. It has got to be something that I wouldn't say you have to lie to yourself, but you can put yourself through something even if you're uncomfortable. And to enable yourself to get comfortable with that, you've almost got to say, this is awesome. I can do this. Like, there's nothing I'm going to do today that's going to break me. There's enough, within reason. You've got to do the right things, of course. So you've kind of got to normalize that within the process, almost normalize the grind. And it's going to come from experience. Doing those basics well, repetition creates belief, etc. The experience of that and the ability to move through, bumps in the road, those long times when you haven't got, you don't see a lot of immediate results because maybe an event or something that's coming up, a result that you're expecting is quite far in the future, may take some time. So you've just got to fill the gap with as much stuff as possible. One of the things we do is we talk honestly about, you've got to be so honest. You cannot talk about what's happening in the moment, training, racing, strategy, or anything else, without an absolute pure honesty, because then you can make changes to it. If you fluff things up or move forward, not kind of really facing what's in front of you, whether that's an issue or whether that's high performance that's going really, really well, you're not going to get the best out of it. And that might mean failing, and one thing that does happen is, and this could happen in the middle of a race. The race may not even be over, but an athlete is thinking that they can get over emotional because, and this is something I try to help them control and understand, is that one race doesn't define them. There's so many opportunities for growth. There's so many opportunities for winning. It's okay to fail. Now, we don't want to fail. We want to do the very best we can. We want to fail in training. That's where we want to find where our strengths and weaknesses are. But we do that by focusing on the process, focusing on skills, tactics, strategy, exploration over execution. And to help with that whole process, having the ability to write things down, to journal, to reflect on yourself, to take a breath, sometimes reframing if something doesn't go our way into growth rather than failure, it's hugely important. And my job is to reinforce that level of resilience into athletes. But it's a practice thing. It's something we learn. It's not just something we have. So it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I guess what you are saying in practical terms for me is, listen to yourself, Failing is not a problem. It's how you recover. We always hear that. The more you fail, the more you learn, and the more chances you have to become a champion. And I see, situations with founders where they really living in their own cloud, and they don't admit their own failures. And it's an act of humbleness, right? To admit that, you didn't perform, and you need to understand why not, and then race from there.
That's the key. And I think what's hugely important too is understanding those failures and not repeating them. Like, I've seen that too. Like, oh, I did this again. Don't do it again. Like, make a different change, make a switch, move forward.
Yeah. Well, we're getting to the part I like the most, which are the practical takeaways for our audience. Let's translate this conversation into moves for founders, investors, and people alike that are listening. So, Mario, if a founder came to you and said, I want to think more clearly under pressure, what's one practice from your racing life you would recommend they borrow?
Well, it would be, again, like, put yourself under pressure and force yourself to make decisions in that situation. Ian just mentioned, if you fail, it's okay. You're learning, and try to learn from it and improve.
I love it. Put yourself under pressure all the time. And I guess it's get out of your comfort zone every day.
Yeah, I guess that's the only way you will get sort of comfortable in that situation.
Ian, if you were coaching a founder instead of an athlete, how would you help them train fluid intelligence? What's one concrete thing they could do each week to get better at adapting in real time?
I say, first of all, is knowing yourself and what you're doing. So conducting a review of the decisions that you're going to make, and actually do sessions and potentially like a clinic within your group of people around you, or if it's by yourself, just doing it yourself. So do a decision review, and then like every week do something with a clear hypothesis and review. For example, execution versus exploration, and see what the outcome of that is. Practicing pausing before making a decision to check things like, what do I know? What am I assuming? And review that process. You get a better understanding of why you're doing that. So you can almost like micro goal setting. And probably intentional practice with how you improve your own adaptability. So I talked earlier about developing athletes to do their own thing and pushing them forward and giving them that autonomy. You've got to do that yourself. So everything you do has a purpose, and that's just what you need to explore and be better at.
I love it, Ian. Thank you. Roberto, now let's get practical here for our audience. To close the loop on the founder side, what's one habit founders should start if they want to think more clearly under pressure? And one habit they should stop?
Yeah, I will start with what to stop, to be honest. And there is this conception that if you are a founder, you should be working 24/7. I don't agree with that. I work a lot, but practically I think it's important also to find your space to switch off. It doesn't need to be a lot, but like, for example, I rarely work late in the evening. I try to spend my time with my family in the weekend, etc. Because otherwise you go crazy. You can actually do that for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but at some point you go crazy. So that's one thing that I would do. And typically that's also where I get the best ideas. At the end of some of these, fresh mind, Monday morning or something that probably was running me crazy on Friday evening, suddenly it's clear, it's there. Okay, I see the solution. It was not such a big deal. I should try to do this. And if it doesn't work, that's what I would do. So that's one part. And then for the rest, to think more clearly, what I try to do is try to step back, which I know it is easier said than done, but typically, practically even try to have walks around, I walk around the city or something, I have a call with people that maybe I just ask to some of my co-founders or friends, hey, you don't have actually to find an answer to this, just listen to me for the next 10 minutes. Let me talk, with somebody. And typically I find the solution just by talking with somebody, even if the other person just say, for 10 minutes straight, then you find the answer. So that's another practical trick that I do very, very often, like pretty much nearly on weekly, if not daily basis, whenever I'm stuck in something and I start entering in some loop.
I guess from what you guys have just said in terms of practical cues, I would recommend we all take 2 lessons. One would be to put yourself under pressure all the time. It works. I've tried it myself. Mario, you've put yourself under pressure a long time. Roberto, I know you have, and I'm sure Ian, you're not someone that doesn't put pressure on your athletes. So rule number 1 is put yourself under pressure. Rule number 2 is don't forget rule number 1. So that way you'll have 2 important rules to remember. Now we go to the quick fire and we wrap it up. For all of you guys, quick, because these are 3 questions that you need to answer quickly and short. One moment, let's start by Ian. One moment where everything went wrong with one of your athletes, but they came away smarter.
So many of those, to be honest. I got smarter during failure, not winning.
Okay, Roberto?
Yeah, I think the example that I was sharing before, so when the market was not responded as I should, that meant that I understand much more about the market.
And Mario?
Yeah, body not being able to handle training for a period, just cooling down, taking it easy for a couple of days, learning from those feelings and use that in the future.
I love it. Ian, one myth about high performance you would love to kill.
That talent is the most important thing, whereas smart and effective hard work outperforms talent.
Roberto?
Well, similar actually, that you're supposed to work 24/7 in order to deliver the best. I think it's not like that, even though many people believe that.
And Mario?
Yes, I would connect it to what just Roberto said. So agreeing 100% on what Ian also mentioned, but often more is not better. Better is doing the right thing.
I love it. And last one, which is the one I love the most. Ian, just finish the sentence for us. You make better decisions when
I seek the information and I'm able to stay calm.
Okay, Roberto, you make better decisions when
you can see through things instead of the things themselves.
And Mario, you make better decisions when
I've prepared, when I've trained, and I think at the end I'll think about what many people just mentioned. Told me, like, aren't you nervous, or aren't you about what you're gonna do? And it's like, well, I've trained and prepared for it. I wouldn't be nervous if I was doing something completely different. But you've prepared for something, then race, competition, or a big day is just one more day.
Well, for me, I make better decisions when I have a good sleep. When I've had a good, efficient sleep, and that is above 22, 23%, or when I have had a good deep sleep, which is over an hour and a half. And I actually seldom accomplish this. So that's my take. Okay, so we finished. And I would like to ask you guys, where can our audience find you, Ian?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Ian O'Brien, and you can find me on Instagram, Ian O'Brien Coaching.
And Roberto, where can everyone find you?
Yeah, same LinkedIn, Roberto Iannone, otherwise zoundream.com.
And Mario?
Well, I'm not a very social media active person, but I guess Instagram or LinkedIn, Mario Mola are the easier places to find me.
So we are done. Thank you so much, guys. It's been amazing. What stands out today is that intelligence under pressure isn't about sticking to the plan. It's about knowing when to abandon it. The athletes and founders who last are the ones who stay calm. They read the field in real time and adapt without ego. If you're building something in the fast-moving environment, this episode is your reminder that flexibility isn't weakness, it's survival. Thank you, Mario, for showing us how a world champion thinks. Thank you, Roberto, for joining us today. Next time on Endurance Capital, we will meet a female Ironman world champion who showed men how to race the marathon with elegance. Mirinda Carfrae is straight from Boulder, Colorado, but born in Australia. We will speak about the quiet, grinding middle where races and companies are actually decided. We will explore how pain becomes performance or failure, depending on the system you build around it. Hit subscribe to be notified when it's available. Stride helps you make sense of your data, see how your body actually adapts, and bring more intention to your life and to your sessions. As a listener, you can use code Trampoline for £100 off Stride 1 and 30% off any other individual Stride tests or supplements. If you're exploring what's possible, Stride gives you a clearer map. Visit getstride.com and keep moving with purpose. Endurance Capital is brought to you by Trampoline Venture Partners. Special thanks to our guests, the champions, the founders, and coaches who share their stories so openly, and to the growing Endurance Capital community around the world. This series is made possible through production by One Fine Play and the support of our sponsor, Stride Health. If you found this episode useful, you can follow and share Endurance Capital wherever you get your podcasts, and learn more about Trampoline and the Trampoline Zermatt Summit on LinkedIn. The link is in the show description. I'm your host, Ignacio Garcia, and this is Endurance Capital.